Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Did someone confirm?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Thank you so much for being with us. My name is Ineza. I am part of the Green Fighter who are hosting this session. And I would like to invite you and invite you to share your thoughts and your idea. Don't be afraid. And then, as you can see in the chat, we also acknowledge the use of French. So don't let the language barrier be an issue, because we're trying to see how we can overcome that one. So without delaying too much, because we are already a bit late. So let me invite Eva, who is my colleague and also the moderator of the event, to take us through. Thank you, everyone. Eva, the floor is yours.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are. I'm so happy and pleased to see that we're coming from different parts of the world. My name is Eva Peace Mukairanga, and welcome to the Youth Climate Dialogue. Today's session will be discussing on how active participation of young people and women offer a quick road in achieving climate justice. I'm very excited to have amazing speakers today, and I think we'll learn from each other, and I hope to have a fruitful discussion with you all. So with that, dragging my intervention and discussions, I'd like to dive right into the discussions and welcome one of the speakers, which is Sadi. She's a co-founder and the co-director of the Loss and Damage Youth Coalition. And the Loss and Damage Youth Coalition, it's a new partnership between youth from around the world, which aims to raise awareness and build pressure surrounding the impacts of climate change. Welcome, Sadie, and the floor is yours. I'll start maybe by asking, since we'll be hearing much of the term climate justice, or which is also often associated with the role of young people or women, can you tell us a little bit about that? Give a little bit of general overview. Thank you. You're welcome.
Thanks, and thank you for having me. So climate justice to me, well, I guess first of all, I'll say, yeah, thank you for having me, and hello, everyone. As Eva said, my name's Sadie. I'm from Canada and I live in the UK. Yeah, so climate justice, I think for me, like if you're talking just about climate action, you would be focusing mostly on basically how do we reduce greenhouse gas emissions in order to prevent climate change? How do we adapt to the effects of climate change? How do we deal with the impacts of climate change once they happen? But climate justice kind of takes it a level deeper and says, given the given inequality in our society, how can we ensure that climate action actually reaches the people who are most affected by climate change, or those who are more impacted than others due to kind of a marginalized identity or other forms of structural oppression that come due to different issues in society. And so already climate change is an injustice because it disproportionately affects people who are poor, who are disabled, women, elderly people, and generally people who are more oppressed in society to begin with. So climate justice calls for those people to be treated in a way that is fair, and for climate change to be dealt with in a way that is fair and inclusive of everyone, regardless of their background and social circumstances.
Thank you so much, Sadie, for a little bit of explanations. So I know that you've been involved in different climate change negotiations, like different COPs. I would like to ask what mechanism will help young people and women feed into the upcoming COP26 agenda?
Yeah, I guess it's worth thinking about why young people and women should be specifically included or highlighted in terms of international climate policy, and I think it relates back to the issue of climate justice. For example, we know that women are marginalized due to the patriarchy, due to sexism, due to unequal opportunity, taking on the large majority of care work and domestic work at home, and having less access to education, to money, to healthcare than men, and not really having as much of a political voice as men due to a lack of representation of women in politics. Similarly, youth are excluded from international policymaking due to our underrepresentation in politics, and also due to the fact that basically we have an unequal, we're dealing unequally with the impacts of climate change that we didn't cause, that our parents' generations and those before caused. And yet we don't have as much input as we should have into making these decisions that will affect our lives and our futures. And so, I mean, I think that there are many different ways that you could make women and youth more included in decision-making around climate policy. For example, by simply removing some of the barriers that people face to attending such conferences, which also have to, they're discriminatory based on nationality, based on economic status. So yeah, I think that definitely getting people to the table is a start. But I think a second one would be to actually consider the concerns and needs of those groups when actually making decisions. And I don't think it will happen without including women and youth. But I'm skeptical because I've been to COPs before, and I feel that they're so controlled by this group of powerful men. Really, honestly, like most countries are led by men, and we've seen that they haven't made the decisions that are the right decisions for our future. And so I fundamentally, I don't know how it will be possible to create a COP that is truly inclusive when on the world scale, the people with the power and who can make the decisions already, it's really unequally distributed. So that's the challenge that they're facing. They said they're going to try their best, of course, but fundamentally it's a challenge because of the underlying inequalities in the world.
Thank you, Sadie, for a little bit of giving us an overview of how it is. Do you have any solution you could propose or anything when it comes to including more of the youth and women actually in the decision table?
Yeah, I think that there are some models, and I don't think that necessarily COP26 will do this. It's only 2 months away. But if I were to imagine a COP that really was so inclusive of people, not only women and youth, but generally communities that are facing the impacts of climate change most strongly, I think there are models of democracy where basically countries would consult their citizens as to what the general public thinks, while also weighing that up against what the science says, what the IPCC says that we need to do in order to combat climate change. So bringing the science to the people and telling them, like, this is the situation. What do you need? What should we do to safeguard your future? And then having those like citizens' assemblies of people, asking them what they want, and committing to doing this in a legally binding way and actually carrying out those policy demands. And those are things that have been tried. Like in France, they had a legally binding citizens' assembly on climate change. And so I think that this is a model that, if it were to feed into the COP, already would become more inclusive, because that sample would be more representative. I think that there are ways that we could do it in and around the COP, such as trying to bring frontline youth and women to the COP and really listening to their perspectives in the negotiations. But yeah, I think it requires imagining a little bit beyond the structures that already exist.
Thank you so much, Sadie, for this. I just know that, yeah, we need to have to think beyond the already existing structure and think of new ways to be more inclusive of everyone. So I would just maybe those minutes to have a Q&A from the audience. And if there is anyone with some questions they would also like to ask, please feel free to take the floor. Or in the meantime, I could ask also another speaker. We have among us another speaker. She's within the COP26 team. And today, she's also the head of cross-cutting issues in the UK COP26 team. She's leading negotiation and mandates relating to inclusivity, empowerment, and she has also plenty of experience in policy and negotiations. So welcome, Salka, and I think we could continue with Salka as we take questions together after the presentations.
Thank you very much for having me, Eva, and nice to come after you, Sadie. I'm not sure I can follow in your footsteps. Yeah, as Eva says, yeah, I head up cross-cutting issues in the COP26 presidency, and I've worked there for about 2 years now. I lead on the Gender Action Plan in the UNFCCC, as well as the Love Communities Indigenous Peoples platform and Action for Climate Empowerment, which are all UNFCCC work streams that I'm sure you're familiar with. And then I'll lead on some institutional issues and the ocean as well, no biggie. But I was going to come here today and just talk to you and listen most of all, and learn from your experiences and inputs and solutions, because I think from my perspective as a team leader in the UK government, I've always very much believed that diversity can create an unbeatable advantage by expanding the amount of information any team can access. An inclusive team is likely to outperform, which is why I'm so lucky to get to work both on inclusivity and climate. And I think this just applies as well to the collective fight against climate change. We should embrace the inclusion of diverse perspectives as a strength and look at it as an advantage, allowing us to expand the way we find solutions, just because difference is very much a source of creativity, in my opinion. And we're also likely to find good solutions if those most affected by the crisis are able to participate in solving it and ensure diverse groups and individuals can be agents of change, as we often like to say. And as we approach the event today, I think it's also important to keep intersectionality in mind. And I know Sadie talked about this, because existing inequalities exacerbate the impacts of climate change, especially for those facing multiple exclusions based on their characteristics, including women and girls, people with disabilities, youth, indigenous peoples, people of color, and others whose views are often most marginalized. And this can very much create overlapping systems of disadvantage. And we need to ensure that all those voices are heard and represented, while acknowledging that some experience layers of marginalization that we cannot be neutral to. And I very much recognize my privilege here as a white woman. And we as policymakers shouldn't be afraid to talk about these layers of discrimination and not be afraid to admit that we all need to do more. But I'm going to stop there, Eva, and I can talk more about sort of COP26 and some specific work streams that we lead on, but we'll be guided by you as to what's best.
Thank you so much, Salka. I think I'll just have to ask, since you have many experience in the COP and you're among the COP26 team, I would like to know what's the step, or as we heard, what's the step to make youth to be able to participate more in those negotiations and much more in the decision table in the COP, not outside the negotiations room. What's the available mechanism?
I actually want to talk about not just about youth, but also about gender, indigenous peoples, if that's okay. But I can start talking about youth and some of work there, because we've been very clear that we must harness the voices and innovation and commitment of young people across the globe. Because, I mean, you're very vocal about the need for urgent action, but on the ground, but you're also facing the impacts of climate change. And that's why we look at the voices of young people as a very powerful catalyst for change. And it's very strange for me to talk about young people as an other group, because I always felt like I belonged in that group, because I'd like to believe I'm relatively young. And I was a youth activist when I was even younger as well, and did a lot to lobby governments on better youth inclusion across the various issues in Iceland, where I'm from. But we are very much on the COP26 side, encourage countries to remove the barriers to participation in policy development, and this includes seeking young people's recommendations, working with them to implement the necessary policies and projects, and supporting participation in COP26. And it's very much key to planning a COP26, which is why we have a dedicated youth engagement team in the COP26 unit that I know some of you work with. Anna, she's on leave this week, to ensure youth voices are heard in COP26 and its legacy. And we established the COP26 Civil Society and Youth Advisory Council, where we have young activists, NGOs, indigenous peoples and faith groups to be part of the conversation for COP26. We're also working in partnership with the Italian government, who will host the pre-COP, as well as a Youth for Climate event, which will bring together 400 young climate leaders from across the world to develop a declaration and a zero draft to present to ministers at pre-COP, as well as linked to COP26. So this is very much the first time a party has held this kind of event. And CPD Alok Sharma has been excellent at meeting different youth groups. I know he's met the Loss and Damage Youth Coalition, for example. And then we're endorsing Young Girls Conference of Youth in Koi, held in October. And yeah, working through our diplomatic networks of different youth groups. I shall also mention that we're very committed to negotiations on action for climate empowerment, which is the work stream that links in sort of education, training, awareness and participation, and those angles, which is also the formal way to address youth. And we work very collaboratively with Younger in particular to think about what that work plan looks like. But I'll stop there on youth, but we welcome addressing as well our work on gender and indigenous peoples if there's time.
Yeah, thank you so much, Salka. I think we have like 2 raised hands. Julio and George. Julio, would you like to go first?
Merci vraiment. Je ne sais pas si vous m'écoutez. Je n'arrive pas vraiment. Je n'arrive pas vraiment à... Oui, je parle. Je ne maîtrise pas l'anglais, mais je ne sais pas pourquoi vous êtes limité seulement en anglais. La question du climat intéresse tout le monde. Je ne sais pas comment vous pouvez limiter cette question du climat pour les pays anglophones. Or, en Afrique centrale, presque tous les pays parlent le français. Et c'est là où se trouve le grand bassin du Congo se trouve dans les 5 pays francophones. Mais quand il y a des réunions qui intéressent les jeunes pour parler du climat, les réunions se passent toujours en anglais. Je ne sais pas pourquoi. On a un seul monde, mais on a plusieurs langues. Nous ne pouvons pas nous éloigner selon nos langues, mais nous devons avoir l'intérêt commun. Nous sommes tous frappés par le changement climatique et nous devons faire l'effort que dans chaque réunion, qu'il y ait au moins l'interprète que dans chaque réunion, que tout le monde se retrouve. Que ce soit en anglais, que ce soit un anglophone, un francophone, nous pouvons nous mettre ensemble et nous pouvons nous retrouver. C'est ça. Moi, j'habite en RDC, on parle le français. Mais dans des réunions pareilles, je ne me retrouve pas. Je ne sais pas. C'était ça mon avis. Merci.
Merci beaucoup, Georges. I'll try to translate as much as I can. And he's asking a little bit about how there is many conference or webinar like this happening in English. And since many of the African Central countries speak French as their official language, are more comfortable in French. He proposed to be able to include more of the French-speaking people also. And I'm sorry I haven't translated everything, but that's a good point. I think you need to be able to make all the webinar more inclusive by engaging more French people speaking and English people. But at the moment, I'm afraid we haven't an interpreter, but I'll try to translate as much as I can for French-speaking people. If you have any questions in French, feel free to ask it in French. I'll translate it later on. But Salka, with this comment, do you have any response to that? But I think during different climate negotiations, there is option for French and English and other languages.
Yeah, I can come in on that. And thanks very much for that question, George. And thanks, Eva, for interpreting that, because I did not understand the word. I did study some French in school, but I've forgotten all of it. We try very hard to incorporate interpretations where we can. We, for example, held a number of webinars and regional dialogues with Indigenous peoples of regional climate weeks, and we ensured to have translations and interpretations within those, as well as we had 2 workshops with Indigenous peoples on Indigenous Peoples Day on the 8th of August, which both had interpretations. So we are trying to do it for as many meetings and webinars as we can. And as Eva says, there are also requirements within the UNFCCC of some events and some negotiations that are translated and interpreted, but not all of them. So something we're very much aware of and recognize is an inclusivity barrier, and we try to do our best where we can.
Merci beaucoup, Georges, pour ta question. J'espère que tu as compris, tu as pu voir le message, avoir tout le message de Salka. And c'est un bon point de noter pour nous tous aussi, les organisateurs des différents webinars, to be able to include much more of the French interpretation. And I'm sorry, I will be mixing all of the languages. I also have another question from Julio.
Yes, good afternoon. Sorry, my name is Julio. I come from Mozambique. I'm not speaking very well in English. Sorry. I'm working in the capital Union province of the Pens. That I'm have one preparation. That my preparation is the traduction. I'm not I'm not speaking very well in English. That is this meeting is very important, but we not to contribution this meeting, but we can you help you that in introduction? Yes, yeah. Yes. Sorry. Yeah. Mozambican, I speak in Portuguese, but for me, it's not very speaking very well in English. Sorry.
Hi,
Thank
I
you.
speak Portuguese if no one else does. I can translate.
Ok. Ok. Thank you. Eu dizia o seguinte, chamo-me Júlio Bicho Ernesto. A reunião é extremamente importante e muito interessante. Eu trabalho para uma organização de camponeses, sou um jovem e me ingressei muito agora, né, no grupo da JWH, que tem criado as condições de poder os jovens falarem sobre as mudanças climáticas. Falando sobre mudanças climáticas cá em Moçambique, concretamente a província de Cabo Delgado, é notória, como sabem, ou se não sabem, passam a saber agora que Cabo Delgado, Moçambique, foi devastado nos 2 anos consecutivos pelos ciclones Kennedy e Idai. Então, e nós, como vocês sabem, que a província de Cabo Delgado, nesse exato momento, está mergulhada na exploração de gás natural liquefeito, que é um dos contribuintes para as mudanças climáticas, porque é um dos combustíveis fósseis. Então, este encontro para mim é o primeiro encontro que eu estou a participar e é um encontro extremamente importante para mim, e a participação, a tradução daquilo que são as interações seria muito bom para mim, para eu poder acompanhar. E muito obrigado.
Hi, so I'll translate. Julio works at an organization of peasants. He joined the JWH, and by joining them, he is now able to talk about and bringing all these conditions to talk about climate change. They are present at the province of Cabo Delgado in Mozambique. And this is a region that you have probably seen, it has been devastated by 2 consecutive cyclones, Kennedy and Dai. And the province is plunged into the exploitation of natural gas, which, as we know, is fossil fuel. This is his first meeting, and he congratulates everyone for their jobs and for what you have achieved. And he, if possible, he would like to have more interpretation so that he could participate more. He also has a language barrier he faces. And I'm Paulo, I'm from Brazil, from Funduelas, and I'm watching and congratulate everyone for their job. Really enjoying watching.
Thank you so much, Nicola and Julio. I think that's the beauty of having people from all over the world. I think we will have everyone being able to interpret so everyone can be able to follow up. And I think that's an issue that many must came up with, the language barrier in the climate negotiations and many other webinars. And I think it's a point to consider much more. It's also an inclusivity like point. When we talk about inclusivity, also we need to think about language barriers. Thank you so much. I think if you want to add something, anyone wants to add something?
Yes, Corsa is this side.
Okay, you're welcome. Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, this is Corsa Balde. I'm from Guinea-Conakry, West Africa. So I'm from the Guinean Civil Society, Environmental Civil Society. So I'm a co-founder of a local NGO called AZED. It's the Guinean Association for Sustainable Development, AWAKE, founded in 2012. And as of now, we have launched around 13 to 14 projects in food security, environmental preservation, and community development. So I was lucky in this year to be selected as a Mandela Washington Fellow 2021, which was held between June and July. So I attended also the last COP14 in New Delhi, where I met Ineza and his knew about our organization, the Green Fighters. So first of all, I'd like to say one word about what our friend from Congo said. The inclusiveness, the language barrier issue is sometimes may happen, but as advocate, as activists, we today should. This is the challenge of youth today. I'm from a French-speaking country. My English is not that much perfect, but I think it's for myself first of all to be heard far away. I have to speak another language. Many people are speaking. English is something you have to learn today. You do not have to learn only Arabic or Portuguese or French and say you will understand what people are saying in the media or in great platforms and in such kind of opportunities where people have to discuss the real problems the world is facing. So you have, as an activist, really to learn English. This is what and the advice I can give to all you today. Even as from Rwanda before was a French-speaking country, now it's mixed. They're speaking English. My country is a fully French-speaking country, but I learned English from my village. When I see someone, I grab to the attention of that person about my requirement of learning that language. That's why I'm managing somehow. So another point I wanted to say is about how can we form coalitions, regional coalitions of youth, to have a greater voice. First of all, they not like advocacy and raising awareness about climate change and the climate change impact on communities' livelihoods is something very great. But we need real actions, and those actions sometimes the communities are having the assets, but they do not have the mindset of finding solutions out of the little assets they are having. Think about Guinea, my country. We have many mining companies who are devastating very drastically the environment. They are doing abusive exploitation of mining, and so they are contributing to land degradation, and they are expropriating land from local indigenous people. So they are living out of that land from traditional agricultural practices since 100 years. So now they do not have any house. Those companies, in complicity with the local government, local government employees, they are expropriating those communities over their land, and this is putting their lives at risk. And they are compelled now to leave their areas and to go in urban cities to start a new life of beggars in the street. So this is something also companies, businesses are contributing. So, the challenge is, in my view, is to cope, the kind of marriage between business and ecology. Those companies have to contribute, and we have to work in such a way that youth who having, social enterprises, they have access to funding. If they have access to funding, they have the ideas how to make more valuable the assets the communities are having in Africa, in South America, in Asia, and all over the world. So those youth, it's a decision which belongs to this generation, so that they can get not in one hand the funding, and then they have the necessary networking. If we have, for example, a regional, or committee of youth, or maybe let's think about West Africa Committee of Youth. What the Green Fighters are doing is something very great, because of this is giving me the opportunity today to speak and to be listened to by other people who are involved in finding solution for those climate injustice, the climate injustice, and fighting for for the benefit of the climate. So we can have those regional committees, and those committees only will have the power to say some words which can be listened to those powerful men someone was talking about at the beginning of session. So this is very interesting. And another question I'll have is, how can we attend the COP26 this year? Because I know there are many challenges related to COVID-19, vaccines, and all of this stuff, and how to get the accreditation also as a civil society organization. Because I want one of the members of my organization, if myself cannot attend, I want one of the members of my organization to attend to that talk. And first of all, at the preparation, during this preparation time, we really we need to have one voice. And that voice, we have to pinpoint the essential things we really want to show to the world as you, this is the solutions we are bringing at the table. So let's think about that, those points. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Father, for these interventions. Salka, do you have any response to that?
Yes, thanks for that, Valde. And can I also thanks Julia for the question earlier, and Paula for stepping in to translate. This is exactly the kind of community that we value, very multicultural, but people stepping into to help each other. Thanks for that. I mean, English is also my second language, although I've had the privilege of living in this country now for 7 years. Comes with practice sometimes, but I know it's really hard because I've been there. You asked a few questions as well there. I'm happy to address sort of in terms of creating youth coalitions and young people harnessing power between each other and using that for energy to work with different sectors as well as representing different views. I think in a way, I welcome knowing how you best find doing that, because this kind of initiative, the Green Fighter and the Lost and Damaged Youth Coalition, are exactly the kind of youth-led initiatives that work best, because then you get to define how you work with each other and you get to define how you work with us. But then it's also on us to create the platforms to speak like we're doing today and having those relations. But I would recommend, I would welcome Eva's and others' views on what's the best way for different youth coalitions to work together and different youth groups and how to best capitalize on that collaboration. And then you asked about attendance and accreditation at COP26. We get a lot of questions about this. And we've done a lot to involve stakeholders in COP so far. We ran a sort of expression of interest process earlier in spring, sort of inviting different youth groups and different organizations to themselves host events and exhibitions at COP. So that process closed was in May, and that's all been finalized now. And we have a number of different youth groups doing events both in the green zone and the blue zone. In terms of accreditation to participate in the negotiations in the blue zone in particular, that's normally managed through Youngo, and because they are the focal point for youth organizations participating, and they would manage accreditation for different young people. So I would go through them for accreditation, or try and get involved in some of those initiatives that have already gone through the application process and been successful. You're on mute, Eva.
Sorry. Thank you so much. Is Nicola hand still raised or?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. My name is Nicholas Kigan. I'm from Kenya. I wouldn't quite describe myself as an activist. Also, just to point out, I do hope that my internet connection is all right and you can hear me correctly. Okay, thank you. So my concern about climate change is that globally, I don't believe that we are doing enough to try and curb this this problem that you're facing. For example, I was watching a documentary recently that got me thinking. It was on Netflix, on Vice Media or something like that. It was about transitional technologies. So an analogy they used was that, say my mom saved up money to buy her dream car, 50,000 US dollars. But then no, she's told by the global stage that no, she should save up and try and buy an electric car in order to try and curb emissions. I find that kind of hypocritical from the developed nations, that we as developing nations, we are asked to move at the same pace that the developed countries are moving at, without the necessary help from the developing world. So I believe that the developing world has a responsibility to aid developing countries in order to help us transition to better technologies. So, for example, that would be electric cars, building wind farms, trying to develop energy storage stations, etc. For me, if the world does not change, if we do not work together, we won't make it, because as we know, Africa is going to be, in the next 50 years, is going to be the hub of development. We're going to transition from a developing nation into a developed nation. And that comes with more emissions, that comes with more carbon emissions being released, people buying more cars, population is on the rise. So if we're going to stop what is currently happening, the developed world needs to stand firm and stand with us as developing nations in order to allow us as the whole world, we need, in order to save the future generation. For example, if I have a child, I want to make sure that he or she will be able to make it the next 50 years without facing food shortages and other issues that come with climate change. Another issue that I want to bring up, it's on the same tangent. It kind of worries me a lot that even developing nations, as much as there has been some headway in climate action, for example, the Paris Accords that were signed recently, I find it that they're just words and it's not action. For example, I was quite surprised to learn that Australia still relies mostly on fossil fuels for its energy. For me, I find that quite baffling, considering that they are a developed nation. So it kind of worries me if a country as large as that can keep on relying on fossil fuels that heavily. Where are we heading as a species if those who are in power, who have the actual power to make a substantial change, are not doing much? So it really worries me, and it's something that can keep you up at night. Anyway, that is all that I wanted to say. I'm very happy about the session that we've had today. I find it really nice. I'm actually surprised that there are people from all over the world, including Brazil. I did not expect that. So thank you all for joining. That is all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nicola, for the interventions and flagging the red flags on using fossil fuel and being conscious on what you do, being climate conscious in Africa as we're developing, and also the already developed countries. And I don't know, did I miss anyone again? Is there anyone who wants to take the floor?
If I may just address sort of Nicholas's intervention as well, which had so much in it, and I've been to see that documentary as well. I think what you say about if we don't work together, we won't make it. I mean, you're absolutely right. And that's exactly what we want to do as COP26 presidency, is to find more ways for the world to work together across countries, but understanding all the different interests of different countries. And that's why the Paris Agreement is such a fascinating tool, because in a way it is voluntary. It sets expectations for what we want countries to do, but they can go at their own pace and decide how they go on that journey. And a key part of that is also, and a key priority for us is mobilizing finance, because we won't meet that net zero goal unless we assist vulnerable and developing countries and deliver on the commitment to mobilize 100 billion finance a year. And we in the UK have certainly come forward with our commitments on that. So I think that's a very key element of developed countries taking responsibility for supporting developing countries on that finance element, to help everyone on the same journey and help everyone collaborate in that way. But there are many different ways that we can go about it, but that's one way of which at least we're prioritizing it, as well as ensuring that everyone has equal access to participate in the negotiations, which is why we were so adamant on having an in-person COP, to make sure everyone's on equal footing. And we also had a climate and development ministerial meeting in March, where we particularly invited sort of vulnerable and developing countries to come and share their priorities and concerns, and talk about key topics for how we could address it collaboratively with that side of the world, which is a really big priority for us. I hope that answered some of your questions. There's a lot in there, and I don't pretend to be the woman with all the solutions. It's also about hearing from others what the solutions are, which is why it's so good to have this conversation today.
Thanks so much, Salka and Nicola. I think we're running out of time. I would like to invite Xiomara, and we'll take another round of questions after her. And Xiomara, she's the founder of Barranquilla +20, which is a youth-led NGO with 9 years of experience in the environment and natural field in Colombia, which has been selected also as one of the 50 game-changing youth-led projects by the Youth Solution Report 2020. You're welcome, Xiomara. I hope you can hear us and you're with us.
Yes, thank you so much, Eva, and my Green Fighters and everyone in this event. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you so much. You're welcome. I'd like to start. So you have like 9 years of experience. You've been working with women and children. Like, can you tell us a little bit about your experience with your NGO?
Yes, the NGO is Barranquilla +20. This started as a youth movement, and then we decided, like, okay, we love this, we are passionate about this, and we want to take it to other levels so we can, like maximize and work in sustain our work to, like, maybe, like try to sustain, because that also finance is a barrier for many of youth-led initiatives. So we tried to legalize like all our contributions too, because we needed to, and also because it will give us like more legitimacy somehow. Can you hear me well? Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
The +20 is because of the Rio +20. Maybe you guys have read about Rio in the '92, which was like a very important moment for environmental multilateral agreements in the world. It's like a very important moment in history because the environmental issues became a priority also, like, or maybe it was like the starting point of environmental issues to become a priority. In that time, the world like convened together in Rio to start the environmental multilateral agreements, and also the convention, the UNFCCC started there, the CBD, among other stuff that we are currently implementing, negotiating, influencing to as young leaders. So it's been a very long but exciting journey. And I'm also very excited to be part of this first generation, like you guys, that also started working in climate issues and recognized that it was the challenge of our times. So even though like we didn't contribute to this crisis and emergency, we already know the impacts, and also we took the lead to prioritize climate change in our national and local agendas.
Thanks so much, Xiomara. I'd like to, since you've been working with youth and children, also read that you believe in, like you just say, in intergenerational discussions. And what do you see we need to build and improve on when it comes to climate?
Yeah, that's very important. I wrote some things because, as you guys also express here, like English is not my first language. Like I try to, I hope you guys are understand me. Sorry, but like I wanted to say that we know that the IPCC has been for decades providing scientific information about why climate change is happening, and also how we, like human beings, already influence the climate system and the impacts that the temperature rise of 1.1 degrees that is already affecting the world. And we see the impacts, especially amongst the poor and the vulnerable populations, also in strategic ecosystems such as mangroves, paramours, the Amazon, and of course, children and youth and women that are among the most disproportionately affected by climate change. In my region in Latin America, climate is changing, and according to WWF, the impacts range from melting the Andean glaciers to devastating floods and droughts. The two great oceans that flank the continent are warming and becoming acidic. So something that is missing is that we need to understand and also like put attention in the thing that climate change is not an environmental issue alone. It's a complex issue, and the impacts of climate change are affecting the means of life of entire communities and also of ecosystems. So it has a multi-sectoral impact. It's also affecting our mental health too, because we know that this generation also is being affected of climate anxiety or eco-anxiety. We are worried because our future and also the future of the next generations to come. But besides of this, climate change also offers an opportunity for young people to lead the way we want to see our world. Also, climate change offers a huge, for me, narrative or like opportunity to write a new narrative on the need for innovation and more coordinated actions in different sectors. We consider the climate legislations very important. In our experience in Barranquilla más 20, we have seen that if we mobilize, convene together, and also draft legislations and push our legislators to adopt it, this has helped us ensure that climate change is going to be an important issue in the local agendas, not for this time, but also in 12 years. We have this experience that we passed this ordinance, so it's already saying and establishing a climate change public policy for the next 4 governments. Governments are around 4 years. So we, like try to ensure climate change in the agenda for the next 16 years in Nariño, Colombia. And this became the second ordinance regarding climate change issues that has been passed in the country. So this is, like a small victory somehow for young leaders, for people that work hard for this. We worked 4 years for this, but we made it. We are very excited because now climate change is not going to be like something that is going to rely on if the political or the government in turn believes in climate change or not, but this is already like in our planning, in our policies, and also in our finance system because of this ordinance. So this was like very important, taking into account that climate change needs a long-term planning. It's not like we are going to promote like very short-term actions, and that's it. No, that's why we also negotiate in the UNFCCC, and you guys also, like are having these spaces, because we want to ensure climate change is in the long term also. Like we need responses now, but also we need long-term planning. That's why also, like these policy instruments for us are very important, so we can like, ensure this somehow in the agendas. Another maybe like aspect that we find very important is to increase climate finance to support projects that are led by children and youth. This is essentially, like you guys know also this, because you are climate heroes and leaders in your communities. And also we need to integrate a right focused climate education curricula in schools and universities. It's like climate change here in Colombia, for example, is a very specialized field. So we are missing a lot of the youth power, youth capacities, because if we don't train young people, children, in how the world is like facing this emergency, we are not going to, like empower them. So it's important for us like to invest in education and train students and leaders and children for advocacy, for activism, but also for careers opportunities related to environment and climate change and the just transition. And also we need to recognize and include practices that are related to nature into the production of knowledge on climate change. So I think that this is also very important, because in this conversation, like we have, like identified some barriers in the climate discussions. And also imagine that most of these conventions and COPs and events also, they have a fundamental basis that is scientific, but we also have a lot of communities, local communities, indigenous, Afro-descendants, farmers, women, that has been adapting to climate change for many years and centuries, like without maybe this science like available. And these are very important to be included in the climate change policies and strategies, and also in the narrative of climate change. So I think that starting from sociocultural relationship with the ecosystem, like this sociocultural relationship with the ecosystem also needs to be included in the climate change policies and processes, and also in the climate change basis for everything. It is necessary to retake those collective practices associated with natural protection. For example, we have here mingas, tulpas, major cabañuelas, minor cabañuelas, and this is because of the phases of the moon. So they decide, like when are going to feed the crops, like when you are going to take a crop or other stuff related to agriculture. And also the climate memory, because our peoples, like, as I said, indigenous, Afro-descendant, farmers, women, they also have the climate memory. They know the knowledge related to climate risks that are in their territory. So also this knowledge needs to be valued, recognized, and included, so we can like bridge the gap between climate scientific basis, but also the climate local and ancestral knowledge that is important also, that has been, as I said, like surviving by their means and also adapting to climate change before. And lastly, climate justice is also a gender issue and gender justice issue. So I think that, some of the previous, like speakers talk about this, and I fully agree. I think that we need also like to invest more in producing knowledge, and also breaking the barriers that are like not allowing women and girls to be part of the discussions in climate change issues in general. Those are like my ideas regarding like, how we also like can like participate in climate change, but also the things that we need to start talking more in our communities, in the local level, at the national level, at the international level too.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. You gave a lot to think about. And I give a moment to participants if they want to ask any questions. But I love the points you make to value indigenous knowledge and to be able to complement it with the scientific knowledge relating to climate, and also the point to include the environmental education curriculum in our schools. I think it's one of the long-term strategy when it comes to fighting climate change. If there is any questions, please feel free to raise your hand.
Sandra made a very important point here in the chat, like she said that it's important, the climate justice it's important, and we need to recognize the barriers that are like excluding social groups, and that's very important. Thank you for that comment, Sandra.
Thanks so much. In the meantime, I'll invite also Evelyn, who's with us, another young speaker. She's a climate activist, climate justice activist, and she's here with us. Welcome, Evelyn.
Thank you so much, Eva. I'd like to thank all the speakers. It's been so amazing and inspiring listening to all of you, and I agree with everything that you said, and most of the things that you actually mentioned. Yeah, I really agree with everything.
Thank you so much and welcome. You said, like, I will start by saying also you're a climate justice activist, but how do you see, what inspired you to be where you are today and become a climate justice activist?
First of all, I grew up in a community that has been experiencing the climate crisis for quite a long time. I grew up seeing long drought periods, women walking long distances in search for water from wells to feed their families, women walking long distances to look for food to feed their families. And I actually thought this was something very normal. I thought this was something happening elsewhere in other parts of the world. I could not connect this to climate change. I personally not really heard about it until late 2019 when I started seeing my friend Vanessa do her individual strikes on the streets of Kampala, and I was so inspired. I got so concerned, and I started asking her questions why she was doing that, and I started connecting the dots. I decided to take some online courses about climate change, and I realized we have been experiencing climate change for a long time, and it's one of the reasons why our country or my community is suffering, is experiencing disasters like floods. It's some of the reasons why people are poor. I discovered an urgency to start doing this, and I realized how much we have very few activists, first of all, in our community. So I decided to take part in this. I decided to start advocating for this. Up to today, I'm still speaking about this, and also seeing different people dying, seeing young girls dropping out of school because the climate crisis, like one of the speakers mentioned, it's interconnected. It affects almost every sector of our life. And while the climate crisis affects everyone, some people are being impacted more, like the women, like the girls, people from Black and brown communities, indigenous people. So you find that the climate crisis is worsening the problems that such groups of people are already experiencing, like girls dropping out of school, because there's no other option. They have to drop out of school and being given away for marriage in exchange for wealth as a result of compensating for their lost wealth. And again, you find that families usually are giving away girls as a way of relieving themselves from that burden of taking care of the girl child. So I discovered, I was so much touched when I did all this research. I was so disturbed and touched, and I discovered the urgency of advocating for climate justice, to make sure that such problems stop happening, to make sure that we achieve equal rights, equal opportunities for girls and boys to have a chance for an education, in spite of the crisis that we face in our communities. You're muted.
I keep forgetting. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your intervention. And I'd just like to ask if you're imagining a climate just world, a world with climate justice, what would it look like?
A world with climate justice is a world where where everyone has equal opportunity to equal resources. A world with climate justice is a world where people who are least responsible for the climate crisis are not suffering more than those who are responsible. It's a world where the people who are responsible for the biggest percentage of global emissions take responsibility and clean up their mess. It's a world, generally, climate justice is interconnected. Climate justice is social justice. All communities, everyone is equal. Climate justice is racial justice. We need to look at people of color as people who deserve equal opportunity. It's a gender equality justice. The women and girls must have equal opportunity. They must give an opportunity to sit on tables, to sit on round tables, to make decisions, both household and international decisions. It's an education justice. Boys and girls must have an opportunity to have an education, and not only look at the boy child as the only important person, the only person who deserves to have a future. Climate justice is every justice.
Thank you so much. I think Julio raised his hand.
Bom, muito obrigado, Eva. Mais uma vez, sinceras desculpas. Eu estou acompanhando nos chats, estou usando o Google Translator para poder acompanhar aquilo que são as experiências das outras companheiras. Mas, bom, dizer que eu também queria partilhar um pouco daquilo que é a experiência nossa aqui em Moçambique, como eu disse na minha intervenção anterior, que Moçambique também estamos a sofremos consecutivamente algumas situações e temos vindo sofrendo sobre essas situações das mudanças climáticas. No entanto, queria partilhar aquilo que é a nossa experiência e aquilo que são os nossos desafios em Moçambique. Em Moçambique, sempre temos sofrido situações das mudanças climáticas, uma das razões que leva com que haja desastres naturais cá em Moçambique. Uma das situações concretas que levou a isso foram as questões de secas e estiagens, e que também fizeram com que houvesse muita redução na produção e produtividade das famílias camponesas. E nós, como União Provincial de Camponeses, temos partilhado aquilo que são os nossos princípios, que é pautar pela agricultura de conservação, que é a agricultura amiga do ambiente, a agricultura ecológica, temos incentivado aos nossos membros para não aderirem ao uso dos químicos. Mas indo concretamente daquilo que é os desafios impostos pelos jovens a nível de Moçambique, é que esta situação das mudanças climáticas nós temos, principalmente eu tenho notado que está sendo negligenciado por parte das políticas usadas no nosso país. E isso nos releva a uns grandes desafios cá em Moçambique. Ora, vejamos, com as situações que temos vindo passando sobre as questões das mudanças climáticas, os nossos tomadores de decisão ainda continuam a incentivar o uso quer dizer, a contribuição de Moçambique para as mudanças climáticas. Um dos exemplos concretos é a aprovação para a aprovação do projeto para a exploração dos combustíveis fósseis em Palma. E não só, mas também a aprovação de algumas empresas para continuarem a fazer prosperação ao longo da costa moçambicana. Este é um dos grandes desafios que temos cá em Moçambique e este é um espaço muito importante que poderíamos discutir essas questões, porque eu acredito que essas questões estão sendo levadas a nível de todo o mundo. Eu acompanhava aqui um dos chats que um dos companheiros dizia que é tempo de levarmos a sério a discussão das questões das mudanças climáticas. Se formos a ver os nossos tomadores de decisão aqui em África, ainda, na minha opinião, ainda estão sendo movidos pelas políticas de outros países. Estão sendo empurrados a continuarem dependentes e a continuarem a aprovar aos projetos de combustíveis fósseis. E isso não vai levar-nos a lugar nenhum. É preciso, sim, que sejamos muito sérios e vigilantes. Nós, como jovens, somos o garante do futuro nosso e dos nossos filhos. Para que isso aconteça, há uma necessidade de fazermos uma campanha, há uma necessidade de podermos dizer basta o uso dos combustíveis fósseis, basta e basta o uso de combustíveis fósseis. Por quê? Porque isso poderá dificultar ou poderá minar o desenvolvimento deste mundo e poderá minar as gerações vindouras. Para tal, há uma necessidade de fazermos umas campanhas e este fórum é muito bom, que está sendo muito bom discutirmos questões concretas sobre as mudanças climáticas. E deveria sair daqui, desse nosso fórum, uma série de estratégias que possam se adaptar a nível de cada país e fazermos um movimento conjunto para forçarmos aos nossos políticos. Nós, como União Provincial de Camponeses, estamos a fazer campanhas, estamos em uma rede de discussão sobre as mudanças climáticas, somos membros da Plataforma Nacional sobre as Mudanças Climáticas, onde existem várias organizações, mas também não só, fizemos parte também de um movimento de camponeses a nível nacional, que é a UNAT, mas também a nível mundial, que é através da Via Campesina, e também a Via Campesina é membro do movimento sobre as mudanças climáticas a nível mundial, e que é coordenado sobre os amigos da Terra de quase todos os países do mundo. Então, a nossa experiência cá em Moçambique não é das melhores, porque temos travado sérios problemas com questões políticas, a advocacia aqui em Moçambique é muito difícil, mas nós não paramos, continuamos a fazer o que podemos, ok? Mas para tal há uma necessidade de continuarmos a lutar para garantir com que paramos com os combustíveis fósseis. Vamos mudar para as energias renováveis, para os combustíveis renováveis, para garantir a saúde do meio ambiente. E muito obrigado.
Thank you so much, Julia. I think we will rely again on Nikolai still here to be able to translate. I'm not sure if he's still here. Anyone else who can help with the translations? I'm lost.
I understood a little bit. I can't say that I speak Portuguese, but I I understand a little bit of what he was saying. I think, yeah, so I think he was talking about problems with drought and agriculture in Mozambique and how it's important to incentivize regenerative agriculture. And it's important to come together and fight against the global, against fossil fuel production globally. And it's time to come together as youth and create plans for every country to deal with adaptation for climate change and to phase out fossil fuels. I think that he mentioned they're part of different international organizations and networks such as La Via Campesina, which focuses on agriculture. Xiaomi, do you maybe have a better understanding? Do you understand Portuguese? Because I'm just guessing. I don't actually speak Portuguese, but I did understand some things.
No, I think, Sadi, it was like, you are like summarizing very well. I understand because we know Portuñol, that is the mix between Portuguese and Spanish. So this is how we communicate within the region. But no, yeah, I think like you just summarized it well. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much, Sadie and Xiaomi. And thank you also, Julia, for the interventions. Is there anyone? I'm checking if there's anyone else with a raised hand. I think that was it. If there's no other questions. There was also on the agenda a breakout room, but I think we're running out of time. Maybe we can share a link in the chat instead of going in the breakout room. We'll be able to have to share ideas. Oh, I think there's Sandrine raised her hand. Sandrine, the floor is yours. In the meantime, if there is any other questions.
Hello everyone. Hello everyone. I just wanted to ask if we can have can you share an email? I have asked about. I forget the name. Sorry, let me check the name.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite get you.
Oh, Salka, can you share your email address, please?
Was that for me?
Yes, Salka, can you share your email address, please? This is Corse from Guinea.
Yes, I think the organizers have my email address, so they can share it as appropriate.
Okay. Okay. Sure. I'll write you about the accreditation I asked just now, if you remember.
Thank you. We share the contacts of the speakers afterwards.
Great.
And thank you so much for everyone who participated. Sadie, Evelyn, and Xiomara and Salka for your thoughts on this topic of climate justice. Also, we're at the end of I think we won't have time to do a little bit of exercises and to go on the breakout rooms. But I'm so happy to have this conversation. I think we learn a little bit more about what actions we need when it comes to climate justice and the importance of having climate change educations in our schools. Also to hear about the voice of the indigenous knowledge, to be able to integrate it along with the scientific knowledge. Thank you so much, everyone. I think we can I'm reminded, as we are closing, we can, if you can put on your video and can take a picture, a last picture for these dialogue sessions. The Green Fighter, if you're done, please inform me. Thank you so much, everyone. I think he was able to take a picture. And it was a pleasure to be with you, and bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Eva.
Oh, bye.
Thank you, Eva. Thanks to Ineva and everyone.
Bye.
Hope to meet you
Bye-bye.
all of you soon.